Assessment for writing. Literacy, literacies, multiliteracies, English. Just what are we assessing? We're going to take a big picture thinking down to a focus on assessment for writing. So how do teachers effectively assess student writing? Well, they have an understanding about learning intentions, purpose of assessment. They understand the curriculum and assessment authorities and other resources related to teaching English curriculum and assessment. They understand the assessment cycle and the importance of alignment between curriculum and assessment and teaching and learning. Investigate ways of collecting and recording data, so different ways to find evidence from students to assess their learning, and the ability to be able to construct some kind of criteria, and they're the things we're going to explore. So I want you to think about the types of assessments that you've experienced. So reflect on the following questions. What was being assessed and what was being valued? What was the purpose of the assessment? What was useful about the assessment or the results of the assessment, and whom was it useful for? Was it fair? Was it necessary? Could there have been a better way? And how did it make you feel? So let's have a think about the purpose of assessment. We have diagnostic assessment, formative assessment, and summative assessment. You may have heard this before as well: assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. And it's really important to understand the differences, because you need to be able to choose different types of assessments for different reasons. So diagnostic assessment is about providing opportunities to use assessment to determine the nature of students' learning, to provide feedback or intervention. Formative assessment is focusing on monitoring to improve student learning, and summative assessment is really related to, I guess, a standard of achievement of a particular point of learning, typically for reporting purposes. Now, assessment for learning enables teachers to use information about student progress to inform their teaching. Assessment as learning enables students to reflect on and monitor their own progress to inform their future learning goals. And assessment of learning assists teachers to use evidence of student learning to assess student achievement against standards. ACARA, as a national curriculum authority, provides English content descriptors and achievement standards, and we will explore these a little bit. The Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority, QCAA, as a state curriculum authority, provides assessment advice and guidelines and reporting advice and guidelines. And we're going to unpack how these two authorities guide and provide resources for you as a teacher to implement effective assessment strategies. So QCAA provides assessment advice and guidelines and reporting advice and guidelines, and they have some amazing resources available for you. So have you accessed this material before? Perhaps you have in another unit. Do you remember where to find exemplar assessments, for example? If you haven't and you're unsure, now's the time to go exploring. So in particular, if you are familiar with the website already, I'd really like you to go and find the Australian Curriculum in Queensland documents and select a particular year level. You might like to choose a year level that you've worked on before or that you feel familiar with, or perhaps that you haven't explored before and you want to learn more about. And have a look at the assessment information provided for that year level. What's provided, what resources are there, what information is there in particular. And then have a look at the Australian curriculum as well and the resources that they provide, and have a look at what's the same and what's different. The QCAA provides guidelines for assessment with the standard elaborations already there, which is great for alignment. And alignment is really, really important, and we'll be looking for this in your assignment 1 in particular, that the assessment appears to assess what it intends to assess. So a clear alignment with the curriculum. The content validity, the assessment measures what it claims to measure. So will there be evidence on a scale, an A to E scale? Authenticity, is the assessment engaging? Language and layout, is it really clear? So if I were to pick up your planning and assessment, is it relatively logical that I would be able to use it in a classroom? And equity, opportunities for all students to demonstrate what they know and can do. And you'll see the QCAA provides really detailed information about those criteria for alignment. Okay, some more work for you to do is to head to your Right Ways textbook. You might have a later version, which is completely fine, but around pages 90 and 91, you'll be able to have a look through the assessment cycle. So I want you to be able to know the cycle, be familiar with it, paraphrase the cycle so you understand it in your own words, recreate your own model so you've got some study notes to return to. Here's a provocation. What is the difference between achievement standards and developmental maps? We asked you to have a look and be familiar with the first steps in writing material. They're quite progressive and focus on what students can do and what they need next. Do achievement standards do the same thing? So using such resources interchangeably can help understand where students are at, what they need next, and what the goals are for further learning, because the achievement standards are really about expected learning outcomes. So have a think about how you might use these tools differently for planning and planning for assessment. Okay, you can return to QCAA again, and I've given you an example here of a snapshot of the resources that are available. I want you to have a look at them and think about the rubric template that's provided, and just be familiar with where the resources are located, because in the workshop we'll be looking at how to develop a rubric, and so if you're familiar with these, that would be really helpful.